took 35 lashes to save a pregnant Apache girl. By dawn, her family chose if he was enemy or kin. The square of Dry Creek was already full before the sun began to sink. Dust drifted through the air like smoke, stirred up by boots, horses, and restless whispers. The gallows at the edge of town leaned like a black shadow against the orange sky. But tonight it wasn't a hanging the people had come for. Tonight it was the lash. If you're new here, subscribe to the channel and tap the bell icon. Stories like this deserve to be remembered. At the center of the square, a post had been planted deep into the earth. A man was bound there, his shirt torn open down the back, his wrists tied so tight the ropes cut into his skin. His name was Caleb Ward, a drifter with the look of someone who had seen too much war and carried the weight of it in silence. His dark hair clung to his forehead in the heat, his jaw unshaven, his lips pressed into a thin, unyielding line. The sheriff stood before the crowd, a lawman swollen with self-importance, his badge polished brighter than his conscience. He held a paper in his hand, though he didn't need to read from it. Everyone already knew the charge. For the crime of harboring a fugitive, an Apache woman, this man shall receive 35 lashes. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Some spat on the ground, some crossed their arms in silence. A few, hungrier for spectacle, leaned forward with the gleam of cruelty in their eyes. The sheriff nodded to the man holding the whip. A heavy-set ranch hand, leather-worn and eager, stepped forward, flexing the lash between his fingers as if it were an old friend. The air grew tense, the silence sharp enough to cut. From the shadows of a barn at the edge of town, Nayeli watched. She was no older than 20, her dark hair braided back, her face marked by both youth and hardship. Beneath her loose blanket, her pregnancy was clear, the curve of her belly undeniable. She had been running for weeks, hiding from cavalry patrols and bounty hunters alike. Yet here was this man, this stranger, tied to a post, taking the punishment meant for her. Her hands shook as she pressed them against her mouth. She should flee now, vanish into the desert while there was still time. But her feet would not move. Something inside her, equal parts fear and defiance, rooted her, in place. The first lash cracked like thunder. Caleb's body jerked, his jaw tightening, but no sound escaped him. Blood welled in a red line across his back. The crowd shifted, some gasping, others smirking. Another lash, then another. By the 10th, his skin was raw, streaked with crimson. By the 15th, sweat mixed with blood dripping onto the dust below. Still he did not speak. He did not name the girl. Whispers rose around the square. Why would a white man take lashes for a squaw? Maybe he's gone mad. Maybe he loves her. The sheriff barked for silence. The whip cracked again. Caleb sagged forward, breath ragged, vision blurring. Somewhere in the haze of pain he remembered the cavalry days, the raids, the burning lodges, the children crying in smoke. He had turned away from that life, but the guilt followed. Now, each lash felt like both punishment and penance. In the barn, Nayeli pressed her fist against her chest as tears burned her eyes. No man had ever suffered for her before. No man had ever stood between her and cruelty. She whispered a prayer in her tongue, not sure if it was for him or for the child inside her. By the 35th lash, Caleb's back was a map of wounds, blood running freely down his sides. His body slumped against the ropes, but his eyes, though glazed with pain, still burned with quiet defiance. The sheriff lifted a hand. Cut him down. Toss him at the edge of town. Let the coyotes finish what the whip began. The crowd dispersed slowly, the taste of violence lingering in the air. Boots scuffed, spurs jingled, and laughter mixed with uneasy silence. When darkness settled, only a trail of blood marked the square. Caleb lay outside the town's border, abandoned in the dust, half dead but unbroken. From the shadows, Nayeli stepped forward, her breath shaking. She knew if she left now he would die, and if she revealed herself she risked capture or worse. The wind carried the smell of blood across the desert. The night was waiting. She took one step toward him, then another. The desert night was black and wide, stretching in silence broken only by the rasp of a man's breath. Caleb Ward lay half-conscious at the edge of Dry Creek, his back a ruin of torn flesh. The ropes had been cut loose, but his body refused to move. Coyotes barked in the distance, their high, mocking cries circling closer with each passing minute. His blood soaked into the dust, darkening it beneath him. The coyotes grew bolder. One padded nearer, its eyes shining green in the moonlight. Caleb stirred, tried to lift his arm, but it was like lifting a mountain. He thought he saw shadows moving just beyond the brush, the line between dream and reality blurring in his pain. Then the figure stepped from the darkness. Nayeli. Her blanket hung loose across her shoulders, her braid glinting in the moonlight. She carried a goatskin flask in one hand, a small pouch of herbs at her side. Her belly, swollen with the weight of the unborn child, gave her a silhouette that was both fragile and fierce. For a long moment, she only stood there watching him. "Go," Caleb rasped, voice cracked, heavy with dust and blood. "They'll kill you if they see you with me." Nayeli knelt beside him, ignoring his words. Her hand, calloused from hard living, pressed the flask against his lips. At first he resisted, his pride as raw as his wounds, but thirst won out. He drank, coughing as water slid down his throat. "Why?" he managed. His eyes, fever-bright, tried to find hers. "Why stay?" Her gaze flickered, uncertain, torn between anger and compassion. "You took the lashes," she whispered. Her voice was accented, soft yet edged like flint. "Not for yourself. For me. For my child." She pulled a small bundle of herbs from her pouch, crushed them between stones, and mixed them with water. The smell was bitter. She tore a strip from her own blanket, dipped it into the mixture, and pressed it against his back. Caleb groaned, every muscle clenching, but she held steady. "Hold still." His eyes narrowed. "You think a little grass and spit will keep me alive? You want to die?" She shot back, fire in her tone. "Then stop breathing. If not, drink. Let me help." For the first time, his lips twisted into something almost like a smile despite the pain. Her strength, unexpected and unyielding, cut through his haze. He did not argue again. They moved before dawn. Nayeli half-dragged, half-guided him into the cover of the desert canyons, where jagged red rock rose against the sky. Every step left, blood on the ground. Caleb tried to stand on his own, but his legs buckled more than once. By the time the sun rose, they found shelter beneath a ledge. Heat poured into the world, burning away the night chill. Caleb lay on the stone floor, breath shallow. Nayeli crouched nearby, her eyes scanning the horizon. "Town will hunt us," he murmured. "They'll come." She turned toward him, eyes steady. "Then we keep moving. Or we die." Days blurred into a rhythm of survival. By night, Nayeli tended his wounds, cleaning them with water, binding them with strips of cloth. By day, they hid among rocks and brush, sharing what little food she carried. Strips of dried meat, cactus fruit, a handful of cornmeal. Their conversations were few, but each word carried weight. "Why risk your life?" he asked one evening as coyotes yipped in the distance. Nayeli looked at him with quiet defiance. "Because you risked yours first." Another time he asked, "The child's father?" Her eyes darkened. "Gone. Killed in a raid. Cavalry came. Burned our lodges. Shot men, took women. I ran." Her hand rested on her belly, protective. "This child is all I have left." Caleb's throat tightened. He did not speak of his own past yet, of the raids he had once scouted for, of the lives he had seen lost because of men in blue coats. He simply nodded, the shame heavy in his chest. On the fourth day, Caleb insisted on walking alone. His strength was slow to return, but his pride would not let him remain helpless. Nayeli watched as he stumbled over the rocks, collapsing more than once, then rising again. She said nothing, but her eyes carried something new. Respect. That night, as the desert wind howled, he sat beside her small fire. The flames threw shadows across the canyon walls. "You should have left me to die," he said quietly. Nayeli shook her head. "No. Death takes too much already. I will not give it more." Caleb stared into the fire. For the first time in years, he felt something stir inside him that was not anger, nor guilt, nor loneliness. It was small, fragile, but real. But the desert was not silent for long. One morning they spotted dust rising on the horizon. Riders. Cavalry patrol. Caleb's pulse quickened. He gripped the rifle Nayeli had dragged from the dirt outside dry. Creak, though his arms trembled with weakness. "They'll kill us both," he muttered. Nayeli stepped forward, her jaw set. "Then we run. Together." For the first time, their eyes locked not as strangers, but as allies. That night, beneath the stars, Caleb slept for the first time without dreams of the whip or war. Nayeli lay beside him, one hand resting on her stomach, the other near the knife at her side. The desert stretched endless around them, silent but alive. Two fugitives, one scarred by guilt, the other by loss. Bound now by a pact neither of them had spoken, but both understood. Not just to survive, to endure. The sun sank low, spilling fire across the mesas. Long shadows stretched across the desert floor, painting the land in copper and blood. Caleb walked slowly, his shoulders still raw beneath his torn shirt, his steps uneven from the lashes that had nearly broken him. Beside him, Nayeli moved in silence, her hand resting protectively over the swell of her unborn child. Two figures, outcasts from different worlds, trudging through the dust. Caleb's breath came ragged. Each inhale carried dust. Each exhale felt like surrender. Yet he kept moving. He had always kept moving. The army had taught him that. The lash had not undone it. Nayeli walked just behind him, her eyes darting between the horizon and his wavering steps. She had no reason to trust him. A white man, once a soldier, now beaten for sheltering her. And yet, she had seen him stand, silent as leather tore into his back rather than betray her hiding place. She could not turn away from that. They stopped beneath the ribs of an ancient canyon wall. The stone rose red and jagged, swallowing the last light. Caleb collapsed against it, his chest heaving. Nayeli knelt without a word, pulling from her pouch strips of yucca fiber and a paste made from cactus pulp. Her fingers worked carefully over his wounds. "You've done this before," he muttered, his voice hoarse. She looked at him only briefly, her dark eyes unreadable. "Too many times. War teaches women to heal, because men never stop bleeding." Caleb closed his eyes. The words cut deep, sharper than any whip. That night, they made a fire no larger than a fist. The flames whispered against the stone, throwing thin light across their faces. Silence pressed heavy between them until Caleb broke it. "I was a scout. Once. For the cavalry." Nayeli stiffened. Her hand moved instinctively toward the knife at her belt. "I quit," he added quickly. His eyes, shadowed by firelight, seemed far away. "After what I saw, couldn't carry it no more. They sent me into villages first. I marked trails, streams, places where people slept. I thought I was just doing a job, until the day they rode in behind me." He swallowed, the memory a stone lodged in his throat. "I watched children fall before I could even shout. Smoke, screams, the smell of burning hides. That was the last trail I ever marked." The fire crackled. Nayeli studied him, her face softening though her voice held no mercy. "And you think that absolves you?" "No." He shook his head. "But maybe. It's why I couldn't give you up in town. Some debts can't be paid, only carried." The desert wind shifted, carrying the faint cry of a coyote. Nayeli pulled her blanket tighter and stared into the fire. "My child's father," she began, slowly, the words heavy as stone, "was killed in a raid. He was strong, quick with a bow. But arrows cannot stop rifles. When he fell, my people looked at me differently. A woman alone with child is a burden. To the whites, I am an enemy. To my people, I am shame. Tell me." Her voice broke into something almost like laughter, bitter and raw. "Where in this world does someone like me belong?" Caleb looked at her then. Not as an Apache, not as a fugitive, but as a woman carrying weight no one should bear alone. "You belong," he said softly, "where someone will stand beside you." She did not answer, but her silence no longer felt like distance. The days that followed tested them both. Heat gnawed at their strength, water skins ran low, and every coyote cry in the night sent Caleb's hand to his rifle. Still, something shifted between them. One morning, as dawn painted the canyon pale gold, Caleb placed his rifle into Nayeli's hands. "Ever fired one?" he asked. Suspicion flickered across her face, but she shook her head. He guided her stance, his scarred hands brushing lightly against her arms. "Breathe steady. Let the shot break like glass, not thunder." She squeezed the trigger, and the report echoed sharp against stone. A chunk of rock split from a ledge 50 yards away. Her eyes widened. For the first time in days, something like pride lit her face. Later, she returned the lesson. She showed him how to split cactus without tearing the flesh, how to taste sap before drinking, how to track quail by their tiny arrow-shaped prints. Her hands moved with knowledge older than maps, older than the fences that carved the land. Caleb followed every motion with quiet respect. One night, they camped along a dry riverbed. Stars spread vast and unbroken above them, a ceiling of cold fire. The air smelled of sage and dust. Caleb lay back against the earth, the lashes on his back healed enough not to sting, and listened to the crackle of their small fire. Nayeli sat, close, her blanket draped around her shoulders, her face lifted toward the sky. "You look at the stars," she said, her voice softer than he'd ever heard it. "As if they forgive you." He turned his head toward her. "Maybe they don't, but they remind me the world is bigger than what men ruin." For a moment, their eyes met. There was no touch, no kiss, no reckless promise. Only the fragile thread of two lives bound by pain and survival, and the faint unspoken hope that neither would have to walk alone again. The fire burned low. The desert whispered around them. Caleb closed his eyes, hearing her quiet breathing beside him, steady and real. In the silence, something unspoken grew between them. Not yet love, but the first tender ash of it. Two broken souls, carrying wounds from different worlds, slowly learning that maybe together they could keep walking. The night air carried the faint crackle of fire from across the river. Shadows moved in rhythm with the flames, voices drifting in and out of the dark like ghosts of the past. Caleb froze where he crouched, his hand pressed against the coarse bark of a cottonwood tree. His eyes narrowed as he recognized the uniforms. Cavalry. And then, the shape of a man, seated at the edge of the firelight, his officer's hat tilted low. Caleb's chest tightened. It was him. The officer who had ordered the lashes. The man who had stood silent and unflinching as leather tore into his back. The desert seemed to close in around him. His breath came slow and heavy, like iron being drawn from a forge. They had hidden themselves in a thicket near the riverbank, the moon silvering the water into liquid steel. Nayeli crouched beside him, her dark eyes following his fixed stare. "Who is he?" she whispered, though she already sensed the truth. Caleb's jaw tightened. "The one who made me a lesson." The silence between them thickened, only broken by the crackle of the cavalry's fire across the river. For a long moment Caleb could only watch, shoulders stiff, hand resting on the rifle at his side. His blood told him to act, but his body was bound by something heavier than fear, the weight of old scars. Nayeli touched his arm. "You would kill him?" He did not answer, though the fire in his eyes spoke enough. But when he looked at her, her gaze was not afraid. It was searching, almost defiant. "You must know something," she said. Her voice trembled, but it wasn't from fear of the soldiers. It was the trembling of someone stepping into fire willingly. Her hands pressed against her stomach, almost without thought. The lashes you took, they were not only for me. Caleb turned sharply, his breath caught. What are you saying? Her words came like stones rolling down a mountainside, unstoppable, jagged, heavy with pain. The child I carry, he is half white, conceived, not of love but violence. A raid came. Cavalrymen. They burned. They took. One stayed long enough to leave this behind. She turned her face from him, tears catching in the moonlight. I was shunned by my people, hated by yours. You bled. For me, Caleb, not knowing what I carry. But I will not hide it from you. The world seemed to tilt beneath him. The rushing river filled his ears, but it could not drown out her words. He had thought he carried guilt enough for a lifetime. Guilt for riding with the cavalry, for scouting raids that ended in fire and screams. But now, her confession pierced, deeper. He saw her, small, fierce, trembling yet unbroken, and the weight of it nearly crushed him. At last, he whispered, voice raw, They did this to you, and I was once among them. Nayeli turned back, her eyes burning with tears and fury. Then why did you take the lashes? Why bleed for a woman broken by the men you once rode beside? His chest heaved. He didn't have an answer that could mend what the world had shattered, only truth. Because when I saw you standing there, I saw every face I failed, every fire I rode past, every life I turned from. I thought maybe, if I bore it this once, it might count for something. The silence between them became unbearable. She dropped her gaze, her hand clutching the fabric over her stomach. But Caleb reached forward, his rough hand trembling as it hovered over hers. For a moment he did not dare touch. Then slowly, gently he laid his hand across hers. You think this child is a curse, he said, voice hoarse. But I don't. Not anymore. He is proof of what was done, and proof that life still refuses to die in this wasteland. Her lips parted, breath shuddering. Breath. She wanted to pull away, but the warmth of his hand anchored her. You would bear that with me? She asked, voice breaking. Caleb nodded once. I already have. Across the river the officer laughed, a sharp, cold sound that carried through the night. Caleb's eyes flicked toward him, but the fire in his chest had changed. Revenge no longer consumed him. What he felt now was heavier, deeper. A vow. He leaned closer, whispering into the desert night. They can take blood. They can take land. But they won't take this. Not what we choose to keep alive. Nayeli closed her eyes, her shoulders trembling as she leaned into him. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to feel something other than fear. The fragile, dangerous possibility of trust. The river whispered around them, carrying ash and moonlight downstream. On the far bank, soldiers sang a drunken tune, their voices rough with whiskey. But in the shadows beneath the cottonwoods, two broken souls bound themselves not by blood, not by nation, but by choice. They did not kiss. They did not speak further. They only sat, her head resting against his shoulder, his arm wrapping protectively around her. As the night grew deep and the stars blazed like ancient witnesses overhead, the fire across the river burned low, sparks lifting like restless spirits into the dark sky. Caleb stared at it, his mind turning, his heart tightening. He knew this wasn't over. The West still carried its debts in fire and blood. But tonight, beside her, with the river between them and the men who had made them suffer, he felt something he had not in years. Not peace, not safety, but belonging. The canyon walls glowed red beneath the sinking sun, jagged shadows stretching like scars across the desert floor. Dust hung in the air, stirred by the distant thunder of hooves. Caleb knew before he even looked. They had been found. They had ridden hard all morning, trying to outpace rumor and vengeance. But Red Canyon was no hiding place. Its walls closed around them like a trap. silent and merciless. Caleb's chest burned with every breath, his shirt still stiff with blood from an old wound. He checked his rifle, hands steady though the world seemed to tilt. Beside him, Nayeli's dark braid whipped in the wind. Her bow hung ready at her side. She did not flinch at the sound of riders closing in. Instead, she lifted her chin, eyes burning with the quiet defiance of a woman who had run long enough. "Go behind the rocks," Caleb muttered. "If it comes to shooting, I'll—" "No," she said sharply, cutting him off. Her hand brushed his arm, grounding him. "I will not hide. Not again." For a long moment he studied her, the strength in her shoulders, the fire in her voice. Then he nodded. If she would stand, he would not deny her. The posse arrived in a storm of dust and sweat, 20 men strong. Townsmen with whiskey breath, scouts with hard eyes, a sheriff's deputy with a star dulled by grime. They spread in a crescent, rifles gleaming in the late light. At their center, a man Caleb recognized, the scarred scout who had once called him traitor, who had spat as Caleb took the lashes meant for Nayeli. The man sneered. "There he is, the coward who turned his back on his own kind for a squaw." Caleb gripped his rifle tighter, but his voice was low, steady. "I turned my back on murder, not on men." Laughter rippled through the posse. Boots shifted in the dust. The canyon air grew heavier, each heartbeat dragging them closer to violence. Nayeli stepped forward, bow in hand, her voice carrying across the standoff. "You came with numbers, thinking we would kneel, but the canyon hears everything. The wind carries truth, and today it carries more than you know." The men scoffed. One spat at the dirt, another cocked his rifle. But something in her tone made even the scarred scout hesitate. Caleb chambered around, the metallic click echoing like thunder against stone. His side ached, vision blurring for a heartbeat, but he held his ground. "You want me? You'll have to take me, but I will not hand her over." A long silence stretched. The sun dipped lower. The shadows thickened. Then, a single sound split the air, a high-pitched eagle cry. Heads turned toward the ridges. And there, silhouetted against the dying light, stood warriors. Dozens of them, shapes of men with bows and rifles, faces painted with the fire of tradition. Nayeli's people. Her smoke signals had reached them. The posse shifted uneasily, courage draining as the odds reversed. They had come to drag one wounded man and a woman back to town. Instead, they found themselves outnumbered, watched from every angle of the canyon walls. The scarred scout swallowed, sweat trickling down his temple. He raised his rifle but didn't fire. He knew, they all knew, the moment they pulled a trigger, death would rain from above. Nayeli's kin said nothing. They didn't need to. Their presence was enough. Caleb lowered his weapon slightly, but his voice cut sharp as steel. "I won't kill you, not unless you force my hand. But if you came here to drag her down, you'll leave with nothing but shame." The words stung deeper than a bullet. Men shifted in their saddles, muttering. No one wanted to be remembered as the fool who rode into Red Canyon and left beaten without a fight. Yet none wanted to die beneath the eyes of warriors who outnumbered them 3-1. At last, the deputy swore under his breath, yanked his horse's reins, and spat into the dust. "This ain't worth dying for." One by one, the posse turned. Horses snorted, hooves pounding as the men retreated, not with honor but with humiliation. Silence fell again. Only the canyon wind remained, whispering through red stone. Caleb let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. His rifle sagged at his side, blood seeping through his shirt anew. Nayeli touched his arm, not a gesture of possession but of recognition. Her people descended the ridge slowly, like shadows becoming flesh. One of the elders stepped forward, his face stern, but his eyes softened as they fell upon Caleb. "You did not run," the elder said. His voice carried the weight of generations, "and you did not surrender her." Caleb bowed his head slightly, words stuck in his throat. He wasn't sure he deserved respect, but he would not waste it either. As the last light bled from the canyon walls, A fire was kindled. Flames licked skyward, sparks rising into the dusk. Caleb sat across from Nayeli, the red glow painting their faces. They said little, for words were no longer needed. The fire cracked, the canyon breathed, and for the first time in a long while, the west itself seemed to stand still. The first light of dawn spilled across the valley, soft and pale, painting the horizon with streaks of rose and amber. Smoke from distant cooking fires curled upward into the still morning air. Caleb's boots crunched on dry earth as he followed Nayeli down the slope. His shirt was torn, his back still raw from healing lashes, but his stride carried a strange calm, like a man walking toward a fate he'd stopped resisting. The Lakota camp stretched before them, neat rows of teepees marked by painted symbols, each one a story of family, lineage, survival. Men sharpened arrows by the fire. Women ground maize, their eyes glancing up as the pair approached. Caleb's stomach tightened. Every step felt heavier, each gaze cutting into him like a silent trial. He had faced cavalry whips and mobs of men, but here, among her people, he feared rejection most. Nayeli did not falter. She walked straight and tall, her hand brushing against his as if to remind him he was not entering alone. Her eyes caught the elders gathered near the central lodge. One old man, wrapped in a buffalo robe, leaned upon a carved staff. His face was creased with both wisdom and sorrow. This was her grandfather, the man who had seen children lost to raids, to disease, to the endless violence of the frontier. The camp stilled. Even the children stopped their play, watching the scarred white man and the Apache girl approach together. The elder raised his hand, and the crowd parted. Caleb lowered his gaze out of instinct, but Nayeli lifted her chin and spoke in her native tongue. Her voice was steady, carrying both defiance and hope. She told them of the lashes, the 35 stripes carved across Caleb's back. She told them how he had stood between her and the cruelty of men, refusing to abandon her when others would have turned away. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Caleb felt all their eyes upon him. He did not understand every word, but he caught enough. His name, the word for blood and the word for sacrifice. He shifted uneasily, the weight of his own shame pressing against him. He remembered the scouts he had once ridden with, the orders he had obeyed. The memory of burned camps, of women screaming, haunted him even now. But then her hand slipped into his. Nayeli's grip was not soft. It was fierce, grounding, as if she were binding him to her world. She turned to him, speaking now in English. I told them the truth, that the lashes you took were for me and for the child I carry, that no man could bear such pain unless his heart had already chosen. Caleb swallowed hard. His throat burned, but he found his voice. Tell them this, he said, his eyes fixed on hers. I didn't do it for honor, or for forgiveness. I did it because I couldn't let you stand alone, she translated. The elder listened, his expression unreadable, then slowly approached. He stopped before Caleb, studying him as though weighing his soul. Then, without a word, he lifted his staff and touched it gently to Caleb's shoulder. It was a gesture, not of ownership, but of welcome. The camp exhaled as one, and a ceremonial chant began, low and rhythmic, echoing off the canyon walls. Women placed a robe of deerskin across Caleb's shoulders, covering the scars. A young warrior painted a red streak across his cheek, marking him not as an enemy, but as one who had shed blood for their kin. For the first time in his life, Caleb felt something stir inside him, a belonging that had always been denied. That night, a fire burned at the heart of the camp. Songs rose into the dark, carried by the wind. Caleb sat among them, still wary, still marked by his past, but no longer alone. Children pressed close, curious about the pale stranger with quiet eyes. The men watched him with caution, but not hatred. The women saw the way Nayeli leaned against him, her hand resting over her belly, and they did not turn away. When the drums quieted, Caleb found himself staring into the flames. He thought of all he had lost. Comrades, pride, a place among his own kind. Yet here, among strangers, something new was being born. Not redemption, not entirely. but the fragile beginnings of peace. Nayeli's voice broke into his thoughts. "Do you feel it?" she whispered. He glanced at her. "What?" Her dark eyes reflected the firelight. Home. At dawn they stood together on the edge of camp. The prairie stretched before them, endless and uncertain. The wind tugged at her hair, carrying the scent of smoke and sage. Caleb reached for her hand, and she laced her fingers with his. Neither spoke. They didn't need to. Behind them, a people who had once called him enemy now called him brother. Ahead, a land still scarred by war and division awaited them. But for the first time, Caleb did not dread the horizon. He had someone beside him who understood both his wounds and his worth. The sun climbed higher, burning away the night. The world would never be gentle, never be simple. Yet in that moment, with Nayeli's hand in his, Caleb believed that even in a land of dust and blood, love could carve out a place to endure. The voice of the narrator returned, low and steady, carrying the weight of memory. "That was my story. If it reached you, tell me what you felt. Don't let silence bury us again. Drop your thoughts in the comments and tell me where in the world you're listening from.